just wanted to welcome you to our Understanding Everest Group's Impact Sourcing Specialist RFI. And so this is something a little bit different that we're doing on going forward here. And I wanted to kind of give some guidelines or some of the things we think about as we go into this webinar. First of all, first question we always get is, yes, you can get a copy of the slides. We'll give you a link to the recording of this as well. So if you want to go back and share this with others in your organization, that's great. Questions, this is not a webinar in the sense of, we got a lot of slides and we're going to go all the way up to the last minute. We've only got content for first third or first half of the session. So we're meaning this to be interactive. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to either put them in the Q&A or raise your hand in the tool, and we'll try to open up the mics, and we're going to make this. This is not a competitive situation. This is not a, hey, here's how I'm going to do better than my competitors or showcase that. This is really about getting information from the industry. We're thinking about it as a collaborative effort, and here hopefully everybody's a winner in what we're going to do here. And Eric's going to talk shortly about some of the motivations for us doing this, as well as why we think you should do it. If you have audio issues, put those in the chat, and Kiara will help you with those. And I think that goes to the housekeeping tools. So let me do some introductions here. And so we have Eric Simonson. He's our managing partner for all of the research group. I'm Michael Jansen. I'm our chief research officer. Rita Soni is our principal analyst on this very topic. So she's joined us to focus our efforts in this space. And Pearl Jane is our practice director in global sourcing. So all of us have taken up the cause here, if you will, and are excited about making this happen. In terms of, thinking about this, when Rita and I were talking about this, she has another title that we use lovingly as the chief do-gooder. And one of her missions in life is to help me, who has a chief research officer, who has a very analytical approach to life and to research. And she's here. One of her missions in life is to bring a softer side to myself and to the overall Everest Group practice in terms of, is it all about profits and loss? And no, there's other things that we want to be thinking about for serving our industry. So with that, I am going to, for the discussion points, we're going to do an introduction to Everest Group and impact sourcing. We are going to spend a little extra time, because some of you guys may not be familiar with the Everest Group itself, may not be doing business with us for years or decades. So we're going to spend a little bit more time up front talking about who we are than we normally would and why we're doing this. And then we're going to talk about the understanding the impact of sourcing specialist, RFI, and then we'll open up to questions and answers. So with that, Rita, you're going to give us a definition and scope of impact sourcing. If you could just jump right in there.
Great, thanks a lot, Michael. So very excited to be talking to what I would say is my people and have this first event as we launch this RFI, just to level set our definition of what is impact sourcing. For most of us in the room, we're all in line with this, but I think it's been interesting as this journey has started, how we're getting some new people that are joining. So impact sourcing is a business practice which is intentionally hiring from marginalized communities, and no definition on what hiring means. It could be in a variety of formats. And this particular RFI is focused on specialists, and these are companies where the primary talent strategy is impact sourcing. And just so that we can feel good about what we're doing here, I wanted to also include one of the big things that Everest Group did at the start of this impact sourcing journey is really define the business case for impact sourcing. And so reiterating here the big business cases of a stable and engaged workforce, access to untapped talent, the social impact, which does have a business case, and the long-term cost savings. Just to level set us all.
All right, thank you, Rita. So Eric, for those that are not familiar with Everest Group, we've been in the industry for a long time, but give us your perspective on why us and why we're doing this.
All right, so thanks, Michael. I'm going to start with kind of the broad picture of sort of where Everest Group comes from and sort of our view in the world. And then we'll drive that into, okay, so why are we talking about impact sourcing and sustainability, and how that kind of sets the stage for this effort and our ongoing efforts in this space. So the first couple slides we'll go through will be somewhat some of our standard collateral that I'll use to provide the context. So we are a research organization, and we do focus just in the services and enabling technologies that large companies use to run themselves. So if you put that kind of specifically, it could be things like their finance, their supply chain, their end user computer support, marketing, industry specific activities, et cetera. So they're not the direct products generally they're selling to the market, but rather their corporate functions, business unit specific things they're using to run themselves. And we look at that from a variety of dimensions, from the processes themselves to the talent and location models, to sourcing models, to the technology models, and sort of the intersection of those, and kind of how can companies get the most value out of those things and stay abreast of the future trends. Next slide, please.
Oops, sorry.
So, and I'm not going to present this whole slide. You'll be able to read it in the distributed version, but basically there's kind of some facts about kind of how do we align against what I just described. The first thing I want to call it is we now have over 200 analysts. And so that's a pretty significant amount of coverage that we're doing. And I'll describe some of that in more detail in just a moment. This affords us the opportunity to go into topics that may not be regularly covered by others. There's also a good geographic footprint we have of both where our analysts sit and the client base that we're serving. And even though we do not have analysts sitting in, say, Africa or South America, we do commonly work with clients either exploring those geographies or based in those geographies. But across North America, Europe, and Asia Pac, we do have analysts and a lot of clients and whatnot. The second thing I wanted to describe is that we, although we work with providers like the impact sourcing specialists on this call, we also work with those who are the consumers or kind of the users of services. These span all the major large industry sectors. We're particularly strong in financial services and healthcare, and have a lot of dedicated coverage there and understand the industry context quite well. Also working a lot with the largest technology companies in the way they intersect with the services space. So certainly industries beyond this into retail, CPG, life sciences, energy, et cetera. But we tend to help the largest organizations in the world that have complex challenges related to their services models. Next slide, please. In terms of kind of our standard research, these are the areas in which we do ongoing published research. And you can see there's quite a few of them here, not going to present it, but they do span the kind of business process, IT and engineering that we mentioned earlier. What we see increasingly is that some of these areas are being impacted by the concepts of sustainability and social good, including impact sourcing, where in some ways we'll be, and what we're doing in our coverage will be both doing incremental research outside of these areas, but also some of these themes are going to propagate back into these. So for example, one of the things that we saw in our earlier work with impact sourcing is that customer experience or contact center can deploy impact sourcing talent models. And so we may uncover ways to add that into the way we do customer experience management services, and could choose similar examples in other areas. So again, the scale we've reached on our coverage has afforded us some opportunities to do things we're passionate about, and we'll talk about in just a moment. So across these areas, in terms of like what does our research actually look like, which I hope will then also inform a little bit about, kind of why are we running the RFI in this process. So these slides are example screenshots from what we call a state of the market report, which is basically an overview of a services market. It does the basic things that you might expect of how big is it, how fast is it growing, and then basically slices and dices. And slices and dices may be things like what geographies, what industries are being served, but it can also be other things. In this particular example, it's for contact center. You may be able to see it's like what languages are being supported or what channels are people engaging in contact center. Is it voice? Is it email? Is it chat? In impact sourcing, some of these same questions will be important, but there'll also be other slices and dices that we would be able to put in to help educate. So our research tends to have this kind of very PowerPointy, data-driven visual feel to it. And hopefully that will help you understand some of why the RFI feeds into that and helps us develop a data set that we can then both educate the market and then also help inform for the providers participating in it, the broader ecosystem of opportunities, trends, et cetera. Fundamentally, the reason that we package the research in this way is to help organizations make decisions. A published report can't have a recommendation that's applicable to everyone, but it can provide a fact base and stimulate more questions they may have about how something may fit into their models. So this is sort of a standard way that we would communicate the research that we're doing. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I get more specifically, why impact sourcing? Why are we getting everybody on this call today and putting this effort into it? The first thing I'd call it is we as a firm have a history with impact sourcing. We first started being exposed to it in some work we did over a decade ago with South Africa's Business Trust, and we started understanding some of the things that were happening there in terms of innovations of non-traditional talent models and providing opportunity. We then, I think maybe 6 or so years ago, worked with the Rockefeller Foundation as a part of their Digital Jobs for Africa to help create the business case for impact sourcing. Rita mentioned this earlier in the session. This led to us building one of our first kind of robust fact bases around this. Spent a lot of time interacting with organizations, many of which are probably on this call today. This also then gave us the opportunity to do a lot of speaking on the topic from different sourcing organizations to different policy-making groups, et cetera. That has actually continued, even though we haven't continued up to this point, advancing the research insights. We continue to get called upon to provide views on what's going on, to share the latest in the market, which we don't necessarily have as robustly as we would like, and look to this effort and continuing to do this to help advance that. Next point. We also have a passion for the topic. There's lots of things we've done that I could have similar bullets that we have a history, but it doesn't mean it actually gets us super excited. Impact sourcing is something that there is real passion for. I mentioned earlier that we cover the services market. One of the things that becomes very important has been a differentiator for us, an area we're continuing to double down on, is sort of human capital and talent. Services don't work unless there are people. And there's lots of different ways to involve people. It could be an employee, it could be contingent worker, it could be gig work, it could be outsourced models, offshore models, et cetera. But there's a lot of kind of how do you help the people both accomplish the work, but also develop the people. And you'll see a lot of this in our published research on talent. We're particularly, and myself, certainly maybe one of the most pronounced on this, but we like the idea of alternative talent models. We're in a world that we need to accomplish a lot of things that maybe aren't quite clear. We need specialized skills. We need to scale things up and down. There's just a whole bunch of ways to do things beyond just a bunch of traditional employees sitting in headquarters building. We've done recent research with other organizations on skilling. How are people advancing the skilling of their organizations, reskilling, upskilling? And so we try to stay ahead of these topics and generally are publishing and doing things that either others aren't doing or we're doing it well in advance of when they're doing it. And we're only kind of growing in our focus on this. The final thing that I'll mention is go back. Is we have a number of team members that are personally very interested in this space. I guess at the beginning of this year, we brought on board an analyst in our contact center space, David Ricard, who spent a large portion of his career at Microsoft and in their Europe, Middle East, and Africa contact center services models. And impact sourcing is one of the things that he worked with there. And as many of you know, they're one of the big advocates in this space. And it was something David, even in the interview process, wanted to know if we were going to do more on. We also have other members of the team on the call. Yash, can you maybe talk a little about kind of how does this fit with your personal passion?
Sure, Eric. Thank you for the opportunity. I was really looking forward to sharing my thoughts. So basically, I'm an analyst at Everest Group, and I have previously worked in the conflict areas of Kashmir and Nagaland in India. And I believe through my experiences that the most vulnerable people are the ones who are greatest affected by the civil unrest and such things in their areas. Women and children are also greatly affected, and we basically work to bring the women and the marginalized communities into mainstream occupations and businesses. And so we provided them with the required skill set and the platform to take their business and arrive and do it more properly in a more systemized way. And so when I had worked with all this, when I joined the Everest Group, my passion for working in this impactful sector brought me to impact sourcing. And so I believe that I am very passionate about this whole impact sourcing project. Thank you.
Thank you. Arpita?
Hi, sure, Eric. Thanks for the opportunity. A quick introduction, everyone. I'm Arpita. I'm a senior analyst within digital services practice in the Everest Group. I personally feel extremely connected to the topic of impact sourcing. I have been lucky as part of my career trajectory. I have been in organizations who not just promote a culture of belonging, they also do it in action. And Everest has been one of the firms where I have seen impact sourcing, a culture of diversity, belonging in action. So as soon as I heard of the opportunity, I was happy to jump on the bandwagon and take the leap forward. And impact sourcing is just one part of it, and the kind of sustainability services portfolio we are covering across teams. I think the kind of depth of research we are building in this space, I think it makes me further want to explore this area much more. Thanks, Eric. Over to you.
Great, thank you. So those are just a couple of the examples, and they're both involved in this this current study that we're running along with others. Last major point. So not only do we have a passion, we've made a commitment to more strongly advocate for impact sourcing. So I mentioned things we've done in the past. There hasn't really been a flywheel effect of ongoing efforts. We're changing that. So one, we want to contribute more. We're allocating resources, including bringing Rita on board, I guess 4 or 5 months ago, creating opportunities for employees to participate and help us conduct these studies. We'll be covering not only impact sourcing, but also parts of sustainability as well. What we're trying to do with a lot of these things is market education. Yes, we are a business, but the scale and complexity of things we're doing has afforded us the opportunity to also follow some of our passions and add those into kind of the fabric of what we're doing. And with all these topics, what we're trying to do is not figure out where's the economics in this, but rather how can we help advance the market's thinking? We think it contributes insights to innovative talent models, different ways of sourcing things, and it's just a good thing to do. But people don't hear about some of these things naturally in other ways, and we want to help use some of the platform we're building, the access we have to the market to help do that. Final thing, this research for these studies will be available for free to the market. We want people to get easy access to it, and we also want to help the providers take advantage of the content as well, so that they can re-leverage it. That was, I think, part of some of the benefit of the work we did with the Rockefeller Foundation earlier, and we want to continue in that vein. So hopefully you maybe understand our context as an organization, what sort of things we're doing, and then how we've got to impact sourcing being important to us, and kind of how that leads us to today. I mentioned that a lot of us have personal passion. We're going to show you Excel sheets. You're going to see PowerPoints, and yes, there's content and PDFs, but we also see this in some ways as a journey we're on together to help people, to help organizations and ourselves. We're also going to, we hope, have a lot of fun together, form relationships, and kind of be on a journey. And just as a kind of a small example of that, I mentioned people having personal passion. This is an area I also have been involved in, and for a number of years was on Microsoft's Impact Sourcing Awards Committee, and as a part of that, learned and met a number of different organizations. And so one of the things I was able to do, Michael, if you can flip the slide, was travel to different places and see some of these organizations in action, write blogs, et cetera. And it kind of helps you not only take you to new places. In this case, it was in Nepal, and it was seeing my first stupa, along with the fact that they now have a problem with drones around stupas, and kind of just broadens your thinking. But it also, working in these areas helps our team, and I think others, all improve our understanding and appreciation for the diversity of things that are possible, and how, if we're just creative, we can accomplish things people may not naturally see or take on. So hopefully this helps provide a little bit of context where we're coming from, and where we want to go with our efforts in this space.
All right, thank you, Eric. And from a timing perspective here, the whole area of talent is our number one issue that we're dealing with. I've do webinars almost every week, and it comes up time and again about this topic or related topics of how do we get more talent. We did one yesterday, and we were showcasing some of the numbers, and the talent deficit here in the US, as well as starting to see that in the UK, is bigger than it's ever been before. So there are 2.5 million more job openings in the US than there are people looking for work, or at least classified as unemployed. So and that's up 1.1 million from the month before. So these are numbers that the talent shortage is bad and getting worse. And so lots of complications to that, but this is not one of the opportunities for solving that is going to be with the impact sourcing, I believe. So Rita and I have talked a lot about that in terms of how do we get to marginalized communities, and that becomes an extremely important part. All right, William, I see you've got a question. You actually got 4 questions. And I will we'll get to those as probably right in the next section. So thanks for asking those, and we will get those. The next thing we wanted to do here is do a quick poll here, just to get some of your involvement in this and talk to us about the things that are. And Kira, can you open that quick poll up? And what are the changes in the marketplace that are promoting growth and viability in the impact sourcing? So we're going to open this up to you to provide your input on this, and we'll share it here in a second. If you want to enter your ideas here, or what you think the growth and viability in this marketplace. Okay. We'll leave it open for another 7 seconds. Okay. Just about half of you guys have answered it. All right, let's go ahead and close it. and we'll share the results here. And so, all right, well, so as part of our never-ending value proposition in this area, focus on cost savings is always at the top of the list. But let's see what we have in there for the number 2 choices here are need for location diversity. So that's been high on the list from a risk mitigation standpoint, and help clients meet their supplier diversity. So, but it's really, you know, what you see here is it's not one thing. This is not like where there was one that stood out from everybody else, and then there was, you know, one obvious answer and then everything else was falling behind. It's actually a widely diverse set of answers there. Rita, what are your thoughts on that when you see those answers?
Well, first, I think we asked the right questions in seeing some of those answers. I'm wondering if there are things that we left out, and I hope that'll come out in our Q&A of why there's more growth and viability of impact sourcing. But I'm just encouraged that a decade after getting involved in this, that there are all of these reasons to be doing it. Yeah,
I think so. Okay, all right. So let's move on here to the meat of this in terms of what we're actually going to be doing here from a mechanic standpoint. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Pearl. You're back with us. I know you're having internet issues. You're back with us. I see your face. So that's good. Pearl, talk to us about the RFI process.
Thanks, Michael. Super happy to be here. I've been advising companies on their location and workforce strategy decisions for almost a decade now, and I've seen how impact sourcing can create employment in underprivileged sectors, can empower them while generating business benefits for organizations at the same time. So my goal is to just continue advocating for this model to as many people as possible. With that, let me just quickly give an overview of the RFI here and what we intend to cover. So we've structured the overall RFI in 6 sections, beginning with the vision and strategy piece. What we intend to cover and understand here is what are the company's visions? How is impact sourcing helping in realizing that vision? What are the differentiators or growth priorities? Some bit of understanding around the ESG specific offerings. So what are the elements of different offerings that are designed to have, say, an environmental impact such as decarbonization or governance impact such as sustainability reporting. We want to understand the overall overarching theme around vision from an impact sourcing standpoint. Moving on to the overview of operations. This section comes in handy because we want to understand what are the most prevalent business models, what are the size of operations, trying to understand the trends by different lines of businesses. So where are we seeing this happening more? Is it, say, more happening in applications or infrastructure or ER&D services, etc.? Also interested to understand what are the different types of certifications different organizations have achieved. So are we talking about, say, ISO 26000 for social responsibility, B Corp, GISC impact sourcing standard, etc. All of that is what we intend to cover under this section. The third piece is around talent. As we discussed initially, it's kind of becoming one of the key objectives why people are looking forward to impact sourcing model. So aspects around what are the common talent models? So say the split between permanent versus temporary workforce. How exactly are you hiring resources directly or via partners? What are the trends in terms of, say, gender diversity, educational qualifications? Another interesting thing we've heard from organizations is impact sourcing specialists have low attrition rates. So it would be good to validate that as well from here. Another interesting piece, what we want to cover and understand is what are the different types of programs or special management techniques to accommodate the needs of the particular group, such as, say, accommodation for persons with disabilities, so on and so forth. Moving on from the talent piece, the next section is around technology. So we want to understand what are the proprietary technology solutions that you have invested in, what are the efforts put in related to building more resilient business models so as to ensure data storage, cyber governance, cyber security, privacy, etc. The fifth component, and rather important component, is around clients and contracts. What we want to cover here or understand is what are the client details, what is the kind of impact each of you created for them, what was the deal construct, say the scope of the engagement, the buyer sizes, industry focus, etc. A special call out here, while we very much appreciate the issues of confidentiality that govern the business and client relationships, we humbly request that you consider providing as much information as you are able to without compromising those relationships. So if you include all contracts, it will help us ensure that at an overall aggregated level, we have an accurate representation of your capabilities and thereby the overall market. The last piece is around buyer references. Under this, we suggest that you provide at least 2 references wherein we can get connected with the client. We also encourage you to share the client contact details separately over an email so that we can start scheduling these calls and accelerate the overall process. That's primarily on the key sections of the RFI. Should we move? Michael, next slide, please.
Yeah, well, Pearl, before we go on here, a couple things. One is I want to reemphasize the quantitative and qualitative nature of what Pearl is suggesting here. So the research is meant to be not just a numbers, racking and stacking of numbers, but it's also to get to the issues. So those buyer reference checks are incredibly important in terms of bringing the stories out that clients are seeing success in. We also see some of the challenges. I mean, I've seen in a lot of those buyer reference calls, and it's a good feedback loop to the industry to understand what some of the challenges are. And we may be thinking we're solving a problem when we are creating one or not solving it. So I think that I cannot overstate the value of both qualitative and quantitative. The other thing that, Pearl, I wanted to ask you about a little bit about the process timeline here. When are you starting? When are you stopping? How's that working? What's the calendar you're thinking about?
So Michael, we've already started. Most of the people here would have already received the RFI, the invites, etc. And we'll be doing regular follow-ups with all of you. We also want to schedule a briefing call with each of the participants to better understand the RFI responses. So likely it is we plan to schedule these briefing calls between the month of September and October. So request everybody to share their responses within the next 6 weeks or so.
Right, so that's great. If you haven't gotten an email from Perul or haven't seen it, somehow not made it to you, please reach out to any of us on this call and we'll make sure that happens.
Definitely.
I think also if you're not interested in participating in this, please let us know. I mean, we're not trying to force anybody into doing this. This is meant to be a collaborative effort among the industry participants. So if you want us to stop chasing you and trying to get this done, let us know. We'll respect that, and that's fine too. So okay, let's just start with some of the. Before we go on to the next slide, I wanted to insert some of these questions here. Prul or Rita, do you want to address a couple of these things? You guys can see them on the screen. About will the RFI include non-executive C-level and senior executive interviews to establish how impact sourcing vision, agenda, strategy permeates the whole enterprise?
Yeah, that's a great comment, William. And obviously, yes, we do want that. I think it's all dependent. Who attends the briefings and how we schedule them is very much dependent on the team that is submitting the RFI. So we're happy to have that level of interaction to get a better sense of the vision.
Okay. Impact sourcing by definition has a political, human development, and economic aspect, whether regional, national, or international. Does Everest Group have a strategy to close the loop, as it were, by providing recommendations, insights to entities that hold influence in such areas?
So we're using the word advocate for impact sourcing because we're looking to help grow the space and get more impact workers employed. We think that this work, if it's picked up by those entities, excellent. At the moment, we don't have an agenda to proactively reach out. I think we should talk about things if there are special projects that we want to look into. But we completely understand that ecosystems are necessary for all of these changes, and many companies, including yours, William, are working with local agencies, local economic development agencies, and we recognize that that's an important component of the growth of this. Eric, would you like to add some flavor to that? I think that's an interesting forward-looking point as well.
If I'm understanding this, is this about the social impact?
I think it's about advocacy.
William, I'm going to open up your mic here.
Yeah, I think in terms of advocacy, yes. I mean, yes, the study people could download, but there'll be social media posts, there'll be probably webinars, blogs, I mean, there'll be other things to amplify. We'll be educating our own organization. As I mentioned earlier, we often are asked to speak on the topic, so it may reaccelerate some of that, media, et cetera. So I think the advocacy can take lots of different forms. I don't think what we'll do is say, hey, if somebody works with us as a client, they must use impact sourcing, or we will only do this. But I think we can push and make it easy for people to consider, offer counter ideas to stretch thinking, et cetera. So if that answers it, then I'm done. If I answered the wrong question, happy to try again.
William, I opened up your mic here. If we're answering your questions, please let us know. Or you have to clarifying things, let us know. Again, I'll open up the mic for anybody that wants to ask a direct question.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that.
Okay. Rita and Pearl, there was one more question on here. How will Everest Group seek to assess the impact of organizations' impact sourcing initiatives over time, i.e. company X is a specialist in region Y, and over a Z period, there's a tangible individual and collective benefit realized. Okay, that's a complex scenario there. Any thoughts?
I'll go first, Adita, please feel free to add here. So what we're trying to do is understanding and capturing the benefits and the overview that has been done over the past 2 to 3 years. So since 2019 onwards, trying to understand what is the impact created over these years and what are the future priorities. So which direction are the organizations moving towards? What are the kind of investments they're making in each region in terms of technology, talent, client contracts, etc., all of those. But we're taking a view, we're not talking about say what has been done about a decade ago, but we're talking about more recent stuff and how do we take it from here. So that's the kind of a lens we're taking, more focused on the impact created in the last 3 years and a future perspective here. But that's open to all geographies. So we've tried to, the focus of the study is global. It is not focused or specific to say Africa, South America, or APAC. Wherever the impact has been created and is meaningful, we will definitely evaluate and capture that.
And Rita has reminded me or educated me, this is not about a geo, helping a development scenario of just a specific geo. This is any marginalized community. Rita, did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. We just had a webinar last week. I hope folks were able to attend, where we were talking about talent and location. And I had a great conversation with my colleague who initially wanted to do a heat map of where is impact sourcing best done. And I said, well, the sad truth is there's marginalized communities all over the globe. But the silver lining in that is that we are seeing impact sourcing all over the globe as a result. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I just to be very blunt about that, I've had some recent opportunity to drive across America, and I would say that there are some marginalized communities that I drove through that can really use help. When you see windows over, or you see boarded up windows over the entire towns and stuff like that, you wonder how that part of the world is going. Okay, and then there you have one more question, William. I'll make sure I get that in here. Where might the overlap between impact sourcing and the gig customer experience? I think that's what you mean when you say gig CX be in the outsourced contact center space, and how would Everest validate this?
I think I need a little help on our research agenda Michael and Eric, with relation to what we're doing in the CX space on this one.
Okay, so here's my interpretation of the question. It's, I think, saying, is all gig work impact sourcing or not? And I think we'll have to work to figure out for this study where we're covering specialists that their core talent model is impact, is to what extent are they really targeting disadvantaged populations versus there happen to be some disadvantage doing it, but the onboarding, the recruiting, the development, all that isn't specialized for them. So we're trying overall to be fairly inclusive in how we do things, because we're not looking at, we're not an NGO trying to fund things and needing to have metrics. We're trying to celebrate good ideas that help humans reach more of their potential, particularly when they may not be naturally have lots of great opportunity. So I think that's one way we'd start to try to answer that question. We intentionally on this RFI, just to be clear, any of the kind of large traditional service providers we may cover in our legacy work. So in contact center, a Teleperformance or Psych, Sitel, you choose all those folks. They're not included in this. These are people who this is just specializing in impact sourcing, that is their core strategic talent model. We will, for other places people are using impact sourcing for other types of models, we will be looking for ways to highlight how they've done that so that others can also maybe adopt that as a part of their model. But we're covering the specialists where it is their core focus, specifically in this study.
Thank you.
All right, Rita, here's another question here. What is your definition, opinion on marginalized communities? So you and I went through a long list of different segments here.
That's right. And I think Sugantha's question is similar on what do we call impact workers. So I think what's most important is not what Everest Group calls them or how we define them, but more that each of the specialist companies have defined them for us and are intentionally targeting that particular community. So if your target community are persons with disabilities, how it is that you define that community, how it is that you reach out to that community, and how it is that you support that community is what we're interested in. And the same can be said for the global marginalized communities that I talked about just a minute ago, that there's pockets of people that are being excluded from the mainstream economy and are disadvantaged in a variety of ways. So who those folks are, how you define them, and how you're intentionally bringing them into your operations is what matters.
And if you want to ask more questions there, just raise your hand and I'll open it up here. Okay, Pearl, here's some pretty technical questions here from one of the, I'll go ahead and open your mic up there. Diraj, am I saying that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So the first question is more at a generic level, not so much technical, but the first question is a similar questionnaire planned in parallel or otherwise for buyers or interviews with buyer organizations, perhaps to assess appetite for impact sourcing and focus business areas or verticals so as to analyze and potentially share in the report or with IS specialists, even if in an aggregated manner?
Very good question, Dheeraj. What we're trying to do, at least on the buyer side, enterprise side, is not just focus on, say, one questionnaire, but as you may have seen, right, we have about 20 to 25 odd peak assessments and other broader market assessments that happen across in any year. So we've included this question across most of the other RFIs to understand at a BU level, at a function level, where is the appetite for impact sourcing, what is being currently done, how can they include it further. So there are questions embedded in our current kind of RFIs that are already floated out to the enterprises.
Okay. So some of that will take time to yield data points. So it won't be in this study. In this study, the understanding of demand will come from what we hear from the impact sourcing players themselves. So those on this call, like where are they seeing the demand? And then what we hear in any of the references. So from that, we'll probably be able to say like, these are the top 3 or 4 things driving demand, or this is something that may be decreasing or changing. So in this first thing, it will be more aggregation of interviews and conventional wisdom up to core principles and rationale. Over time, due to some of the others, it'll start to become more data-based and able to be divined within the context of other decisions people are making, not just a pure play impact sourcing decision.
And again, I can't state the need or the opportunity to have those qualitative conversations on those buyer reference checks. So again, we're not trying to use them to grade you specifically against your peers. We're trying to get the storylines behind why people are doing this, not just racking stacking numbers. So
I appreciate it.
You want to try to answer some of those questions, and I'm thinking maybe a couple.
Just before you go on to the other questions, I think this is a very big one. The technical ones we could even ask out separately, and we're fine. I would urge you to consider one of the biggest gaps that impact sourcing specialists have felt all throughout. For us, it's been a 20-year journey, just like Everest, it has been for a decade now. And the biggest gap has been understanding the demand side, understanding buyer behavior, understanding what those perhaps those focus segments could be. I would urge you to consider this as an area. While I appreciate that your existing RFIs would cover it, if a focused approach towards even a set of organizations, perhaps where there has been past appetite or perhaps potential appetite, it could be considered maybe a part 2 of this report with the buyers or whatever. That's really going to be a very relevant component of what would be valuable information on the specialist side. While of course the buyers would be educated with this, I think the education of the specialists would be greatly enhanced with an approach towards understanding buyer behavior and focus segments. So I'd urge you to consider that as possible.
Yeah, so I think this is a walk before you run conversation, and so we're going to take this as an evolutionary conversation. Eric, if you want to add to that, that's fine, but I think it's a one step at a time type thing.
And
but I appreciate your input for sure.
Yeah. So what we see as we launch sustained research in new areas is the ecosystem itself builds. So as we start saying more about this, our lists and people who attend and participate in surveys will grow, and so we'll have greater access to people making impact sourcing decisions. And we may start to be able to run virtual roundtables with them, start to have lists, email campaigns, newsletters, et cetera. But it's sort of, in general, from my past experience in impact sourcing, although for some of the very large companies, it was easy to spot where they were doing this and who was responsible. Once you went past that first dozen companies, it was very hard to know where anybody was considering or thinking about anything. And so I think what we're trying to do is draw those people out by educating the market. And as we get more of them coming out, it'll be easier to understand what their thinking is and how it's changing. So it's again kind of a journey. Do I think we'll be able to help contribute to the need that you've expressed? Yes, but I think it will itself evolve. We won't be able to have a detailed map of the industry and all the growth rates, 6 months into this.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, Prul, if you could take those more technical questions on the specific spreadsheet answers that he was looking for would be great. And I'd also add to what Eric said is help us be successful in this, and then we can continue the journey with you guys. So some other questions here. Will the scope include the estimates of global demand for service offerings from impact service suppliers? I think global demand, we're going to show global supply, I think, more so from this process. Demand will be something we just talked about here. Is that fair? I mean, we'll get some of that in the qualitative aspects of it, but I don't know that we're going to come up with a demand number per se. We're going to get a supply set. What you guys are talking about from the supply side? Okay. All right. So how do we promote effectively impact sourcing in the U.S. and the value proposition that we'll understand aside from cost? So, I mean, I think that's one of the core goals of this analysis, right?
Right. I think that's the core of what, when we use the word advocate, that's what we're talking about doing, is promoting impact sourcing, and not with a focus on the US, but across the globe. So I think in terms of how we'll effectively promote it, it's going to be the results of this study will then translate into the report that Eric shared, the state of the market. And from that, we'll be able to extract a lot of other advocacy tools. We'll be able to have more roundtables about it. We'll be able to put more evidence even across the board in our various other practices. As I mentioned, last week, we had a conversation about talents and locations, and we started the conversation about impact sourcing, but it was very high level. We weren't able to put out any of the details because we're about to conduct the study. So I think that's what you mean, Anthony, in terms of promoting effectively. And if anyone wants to add.
Yeah, I think he's also saying beyond cost. So I think that was part of when we did some of the original work with Rockefeller was important. And I think we'll are re-articulating that value proposition, what drives it, how is it different for maybe different types of work, and kind of those nuances will be important for us to articulate and be able to help people understand.
Anthony, I opened up your mic there if you want to add to your question there or do a follow-up. Okay. You also asked a question, Anthony, about how to get support from the government to strengthen the support for impact sourcing. You guys want to take a stab at that?
I mean, I'm not sure that it's any different than what we answered earlier in terms of the advocacy that we're going to be doing across the board, the way that we're raising the profile of impact sourcing and putting the market research out there. Beyond that, we don't have plans to target specific governments for their support, but I think highlighting the ecosystem players in specific geographies will, in and of itself, strengthen that support.
So we're a private research. We are not funded by any government of any sort, other than to, we occasionally do a few projects, but our charter is not government oriented. Okay. So I'm not seeing any more questions here. Oh, there's one here. In order to get wider acceptance for impact sourcing, it may be important to include large companies who are not working with impact sourcing. So I think, again, it goes back to for this round of analysis here, we are going after the bioreferences. So as we get bioreferences, we will include any size company that's where the needle's being moved. Okay. Let's move on here to Parul. You had one more slide here. Let me just move the slides ahead a little bit. Some rules of the road here in terms of how we're thinking about this.
Point being, as we walk through this kind of an exciting journey together, we wanted to set out 3 basic rules up front. First, this is not a typical Everest Group peak matrix assessment where we are evaluating, say, supplier A versus B. The intention here, as Eric, Rita, Michael mentioned earlier, is to celebrate the efforts at an overall industry level, celebrate efforts that address ESG issues across different kinds of business offerings, different kind of solutions. As of now, we do not plan to kind of include this or make this a peak matrix assessment. Second point being around.
We won't. Yeah, we won't. It's not as of now. We won't.
Thanks, Eric. Second point around confidentiality. A couple of you had already reached out to us for signing NDAs. We're happy to do that. We at Everest Group take our confidentiality pledge very seriously. Any information that we will collect, which is either contract specific or buyer specific, revenue specific information, it will only be presented back to the industry in an aggregated fashion. Now, this confidentiality pledge will also extend to our individual Everest Group advisors who will not be granted access to any unaggregated information. So please be assured, all of these findings, when it comes in the report, is to build a robust view of the industry, the capabilities, and kind of advocate for them. We're happy to sign any NDAs that may assure, so especially the private companies, around their revenue numbers, talent numbers, etc. The third point around, again, emphasizing the advocacy. It's about celebrating everyone's success, advocating the model to broader industry. This is, as I think we mentioned in how we introduced the call, right? We're trying to do better for the world, trying to be, in Rita's words, as she is the official do-gooder for our organization. So we're trying to just advocate for the model in general.
Okay.
That's, yep.
In terms of related content here, Pearl, you want to just quick overview on that?
Definitely. So these are, this deck will be circulated with all the participants, and you can have, feel free to go through the existing coverage, existing content that we already have published here. So you'll see lots of blogs touching upon different aspects of impact sourcing, sustainability, ESG, across different business units. Feel free to peruse through them. In addition, we've also indicated some of the thought leadership that we plan to publish in this space, things around sustainability, smart cities, location, talent, etc. All of that will be covered. Overall, trying to make a point that we're totally invested in this. This is one of the key studies that we've kickstarted on the impact sourcing side, but this overall theme continues to be a big focus area for Everest Group.
Okay, thank you. And finally, what we want to do is ask you a quick poll here on what you see the benefits of Everest to your business. So asking you, so as we do the results and we think about this industry, just ask you a quick question here. And we'll open up the quick poll there for you to give us your opinion on what's going to help the most for your business. How do you see this helping you guys? So if you could give us a quick response back on that, would be appreciated. Okay, we'll leave it open for another 7 seconds, 5 seconds, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we'll show you the results here. Okay, so advocacy, the benefits here is the #1 answer. So that's not, I think that's pretty consistent with what we thought. So again, it's all these things. I mean, I can point to the #1 answer here, Rita, but it looks like it's a consistency. All these things are going to be important to folks in slightly different ways. Okay, all right. So we're at the end of our time here. If you have additional questions, the slides will be provided in a link in a follow-up email. If you have questions for myself, Eric, Rita, Pearl, Arpita, or Yash, we'll be in constant contact to make sure that we get those answered for you, and look forward to working with you over the next several months to showcase these results and do what we said we were going to do. Rita, any other final thoughts, Rita?
I just want to thank everyone for being here and for doing all the inspiring work that you're doing. We're benefiting from this amazing work and hope that we can just do our best to support it and grow it. And if there are companies that you know of that are also doing this amazing work, that are in your ecosystem, there's a little bit of co-opetition that happens in this space in some senses. So please do turn us on to those companies and let them know about the study. We want to make it as, even though Michael said, I'm not going to arm twist you, I'd like to arm twist you and arm twist those that can participate share as much as they can, because I think the more that we put out there, the better we can advocate for this space. Thank you. And thank you to the team for putting all of this together and volunteering to be part of it. It's amazing.
All right, Eric, any last moments? Any last thoughts?
Just to echo Rita's point on thanking people for all the good they're doing and the chance to work together on this.
All right, fantastic. Let us know if we can help, and we'll be in constant conversation over the next few weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you.